Доброе утро, дамы и господа. Мы начинаем нашу работу.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are beginning our work. My name is Stanislav Kuznetsov, and on behalf of the organizing committee of this Cyber Congress, and on behalf of the management of Sberbank of Russia, I would like to welcome you all here in this room at the World Trade Center. Please be advised that this second International Cyber Congress was attended by over 2,500 participants from 63 countries of the world. I think we are about to have a great 2 days of work. There's going to be a lot of conferences, seminars, reports, and I think that this Congress will offer a unique opportunity for the participants to exchange opinion and certainly network and establish good cooperation relationships. The core slogan of this forum, of this Congress, should be something involving the words like confidence, trust, communications, collaboration, and cooperation. Dear colleagues, I would like to wish all of us successful and fruitful work at this second International Cybersecurity Congress in Moscow. And right now, we are kicking off the first plenary session, and I would like to invite on stage Mr. Misha Gleni, a journalist from Britain of good standing, who is the author of very interesting journalistic investigations. He is a well-recognized expert in cybersecurity.
I'm going to ask my panelists to join me. If they'd like to come up. Starting with, thank you, starting with Minister Noskov, who is the Minister of Digital Development, Communications and Infrastructure of the Russian Federation. You can see all their biographies in your material. And then Hans-Wilhelm Dünn, who is the President of the Cybersecurity Council of Germany. Jürgen Storbeck, who was the first director of Europol and has since worked with a large number of international and national agencies on the issue of cybercrime, amongst others. Then Vladislav Onyshchenko, who is the head of the Analytical Center for the Government of the Russian Federation, which is a sort of think tank for the Russian government, but it also administers the Russian National Program for Digitalization. And then finally, Dr. Ömer Fatih Sayan, who is the Deputy Minister of Transport and Infrastructure of Turkey. Дамы и господа, доброе утро.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
This is our first session, and I think it's going to be a very important one in terms of setting the tone. We're going to address a variety of issues, both about the relationship between the state and network computer systems, the individual, and the private sector. Now, during this session and in other sessions, we are going to have some interactive aspects for you, the audience, to join in with. And you will have found on your seats a little calculator. And when we ask the voting questions in this session, we will be asking 2 questions, one at the beginning, one at the end. then you press either 1, 2, or 3, depending on which answer you would like to go for. Or, of course, if you don't agree with any of the answers, you press nothing. But before we start, we're going to have a short video. Before we go to that video, I'm just going to ask our panelists whether anyone wants to start with a short introduction about what their major concerns are now, although we'll have a chance after the video to interrogate them at greater length. So does anyone want to kick off before the video? Or yes? Video. We're going to have the video first, Jürgen. I think that's the better idea, and then we'll come to you individually. Now, I have to warn you that at 10:40, Minister Noskov has to go for a meeting, so he will gently depart the stage at 10:40. Don't be alarmed by it. It's not an emergency. Okay, so if we can run the video before we get to the substance of the session.
The translator does not hear the video. The translator does not hear the video. There will be no interpretation of the video as the translator cannot hear the video.
Информация стала самым ценным активом, и отсутствие достаточной кибергигиены делает каждого из нас уязвимым звеном. Сегодня более 65% совершеннолетних жителей планеты хотя бы раз подвергались нападению в киберпространстве. В 2019 году кибератаки вошли в пятерку глобальных рисков, обогнав терроризм и природный катаклизм. К 2022 году ущерб мировой экономики от действий киберпреступников может достичь $8 триллионов. Чтобы защитить себя, некоторые государства возводят все больше цифровых границ. Однако киберпреступники сегодня больше не хакеры-одиночки, а организованные группировки, структуру которых напоминает структуру крупнейших международных корпораций. Они могут обходить практически любые ограничения. Отсутствие международных киберстандартов и единого подхода к обеспечению безопасности позволяет таким группам беспрепятственно совершать десятки атак одновременно. Начнем ли развивать открытый диалог между бизнесом и государством на глобальном уровне? Сможем ли объединить инициативы по борьбе с киберпреступностью? Или киберпреступники так и будут идти на шаг впереди?
I don't suppose there is anyone here who underestimates the variety of threats that we face in cyberspace at the moment. But we're going to start off with the first vote. And the question on the first vote runs, who do you think bears the most responsibility for security if you are using online services and applications based outside the territory that you live in? Is it the state to which the user belongs? Or is it the website and the service provider? Or is it the user? Who bears most responsibility? So those are the three questions. Please punch in your answers now. Oh, the clock is ticking. And the answer is, well, that's very interesting. So the state doesn't seem to bear much responsibility, Konstantin Noskov, the user, obviously, a lot, but also the private sector. So given that, you're Minister of Digital Development in Russia, and of course, as you know, we're going through the extraordinary program across the world of digital transformation, which is bringing with it new security challenges all the time. You're responsible for digital development across an entire country. So what are your goals and priorities, and does it make you feel better that only 17% of people in this conference don't think that you bear much responsibility for security?
Спасибо за вопрос.
Well, thank you for the question. Good morning, dear colleagues. Well, let me respond to the survey first. You know, it might be because of my office that I had two consoles. You know, I voted twice. I answered 1 and 3. I chose the first and the third options. You know, as a human, I think I'm responsible for my own security, so I pressed 3. But as a minister, I can't really respond differently. I said that, yes, the government is responsible. So, yes, the government is responsible for protecting users in cyberspace. And I think the truth is someplace right in the middle between these answers. Misha? Would you like me to give a more expanded response, or shall I just answer directly? Well, the question was about the global goals of the program. You know, before I came into cybersecurity, before we do anything in cybersecurity, we should make information available everywhere. We should make information flow between the various economic actors and citizens. So one of the priorities of this program is bring internet access to the last user, to bridge that final mile between the providers and the government and the citizens. The level of penetration of high-speed internet is pretty high in Russia, but by 2020, I think the target is 98% of penetration. And to achieve these 98% of penetration, the government has been investing heavily into fiber optic cables and other modes of connectivity. So before we actually fight the cyber threats, we should actually make the internet available everywhere. And fighting the threats is obviously, you know, cut people off, cut the cable, cut the online access. But the future it does lie with the digital economy. So this is the only way we can go. As for the other priorities, we are handling various issues of cybersecurity as part of the program. We are training employees for the digital economy, and a big chunk of our responsibilities is regulation. That, as part of the digital economy program, does pose new challenges that we need to meet. A few words to say by way of commenting the video and the title of this session, you know, the path to global cyber resilience, a walk together. You know, in the past couple of years, it has mostly been not just the traditional understanding of what cybersecurity is, you know, all those malicious actors, hackers, breaking into something. That is a popular idea, but there is some standoff between the governments in cyberspace, and we see increasing number of examples when big companies encounter slowdowns in operations because something's wrong with their IT systems. You read this recent article in the US paper. We see the story unfolding around Huawei. I think the threat in the emerging cyber world is not just individual hackers, nor groups of hackers. I think the core threat is the monopoly of certain products in the entire world. You know, the entire world seems to be weaned to the monopolistic search engine, one social network, and the same goes to hardware providers. And this seems to be the main threat to cybersecurity in the world. You know, we certainly do a lot of things to replace the imports, you know, import replacement program, as we call it. But as I speak at international forums, I keep saying to my colleagues, we can't close up. Telecoms are global. We can't build everything. No country should aim to build everything and be self-sufficient inside the country. Yet we must ensure diversification of products in the world. And that would ensure a choice, and that would avoid us the threats that unfortunately are materializing in the world. So today, cybersecurity should be treated broader, more broadly. We shouldn't be talking about just hacker attacks. It should be information security worldwide. That is becoming critical in the world.
That was an absolutely fascinating intervention. By the way, I forgot to mention, I apologize, that if you need translation, then on your devices, channel 8 is for the English translation from Russian, and channel 7 is the translation from English into Russian. Absolutely fascinating, because you mentioned there monopoly products. Essentially in the world, and you mentioned Huawei as well, essentially in the world we have two sources of monopoly products. One is the United States, and the other is China. And in the middle you have Russia, and you have the European Union and other European states who basically have to use one or the other. So I'd just like to come back to you and ask you, do you think there is a possibility, because neither China nor the United States are going to voluntarily give up that monopoly, do you think there is a possibility that either Russia or the European Union, or who knows, some sort of collaboration, would be able to come up with alternative products to break those monopolies?
Well, as for China, I would not say that this country is a monopoly player in the markets. They are doing pretty well in telecom equipment, but as for the software, they are more or less self-sufficient and self-contained. They do a lot of volume in terms of money, in terms of users, but as for international presence, as for geographical footprint, software with China origin is not that rife. As for Russia's capability, it might be a historic thing. I don't know whether the government had to do with this. We are doing pretty well in IT, and we have good products. The Russian search engine is more popular than Google, for instance. It is the Russian social networks that are more popular in Russia. And this works not just in Russia, it works in the entire Russian-speaking world, which counts up to 300 million people. So I think, for sure, Russian products have a chance to gain some foothold in the European markets, because the logic of the Russian social networks, Odnoklassniki, former classmates of Kontakte and Contact, are closer to Facebook, but the logic of WeChat is not really understood by the rest of the world. It's just a different mindset. You know, our products operate a European mindset because they grew in parallel to the all too known American products. Because I think the chance is there. And the producers, the developers of these products, I mean, there's no hiding this. American producers, American developers demonstrated pretty clearly to the world that they can just renege on their promise of their obligations to the rest of the world. And I think the world will make conclusions. We are pretty open for cooperation. We are open to using other products. I stand firmly for the diversification of products in the world. We will develop and buy from various vendors in the world.
implications of what you're saying is that this idea, which we've heard a lot about in Europe and the US recently, of the creation of a Russian internet, you seem to imply that that is not going to happen.
Well, you know, that was mostly headlines. You know, there are no crazy people in Russia. The internet is, by definition, an open environment. There's just no question about this. Yet we are certainly working on making ourselves more secure from the risks that are out there. You know, when we might be disconnected from the World Wide Web as a nation, this is a risk to be faced, and we need to make ourselves secure from this risk. But voluntarily, we will never do this. There's just no rationale for this. So security, yes. Disconnecting ourselves from the global internet, no.
Thank you very much. And if I can go over to Minister Sayan now from Turkey now, you're responsible for a really critical aspect of the national infrastructure, that is transport. So above all else, but also other parts as well. We know that Turkey has a relatively developed internet structure, but we also know that Turkey has some very smart hackers, and you also live in let's say, a lively part of the world. And so you must face a huge number of challenges. How concerned are you about the security of Turkey's national infrastructure?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address such a distinguished audience. We are living in the age of digital transformation, and countries that clearly understand and wisely manage this transformation would be in a position to take the advantage when compared to the others, because digital transformation plays a vital role actually in easing access to the knowledge, supporting the economic growth, creating new job opportunities, increasing democratic participation, and providing transparency and accountability. And countries who are superior to others in this context will be getting and will be more improved on this sense. And digital economy that defines the global network of economic interactions that is shaped and enabled by the ICTs, and all of us are aware of this, and we are on the edge of this in many countries. And there is no doubt that the internet is the backbone of ICT growth, resulting in a more inclusive digital economy where all layers of economic activities depend on broadband networks and services. And as you mentioned, in Turkey, the internet penetration is more than 95%. And we are, as the 100th anniversary of the Turkish Public Foundation, we are bringing FTTH, fiber to the home, in more than 97% of the population. In order to benefit from this digital economy, it's a crucial challenge that needs to be tackled, and this is cybersecurity. We all know that the more we use the technology, the more we become dependent on it, and the more we become vulnerable to its associated risks. Individuals, companies, critical infrastructures, and states are under these cyber threats. And ensuring cybersecurity is not only a necessity for just coping with threats in technology-intensive areas anymore. The cybersecurity has become a big factor affecting nations' prosperity, and it's a vital part of our national security in these days because of associated risks to the social and economic life, and especially attacks that are targeting critical infrastructure have become a huge problem for every country. And in today's world, the annual cost of the attacks have been increased exponentially. Especially, we have experienced this in many neighboring countries to us. And because of the technological developments, and cyber attacks have become easier, cheaper for the attackers, while the negative effects and the cost of the victims are rapidly increasing, and the number of attacks is estimated to increase and get more difficult in the future. The attacks are getting more intelligent, more target-oriented. As a result of defending against these attacks, this requires new and up-to-date methods and instruments. And at this point, we are in the need of, and we should understand the importance of international cooperation. A major issue in cyberspace is that attackers have the advantages, all advantages of the anonymity. And we are all aware of that. The smart ones who know how they can hide themselves within the international complex architecture of internet, and attackers often use the paths where the attacked country has poor diplomatic relations, and we know that national jurisdiction ends where a telecom cable crosses the border. So international cooperation is very important, and I would like to tell in front of a multinational audience that we could perform much better if we do cooperate, and I found that's why it's important to address such a community. Law enforcement mostly suffers because of the international nature of the internet, and investigation of cyber criminals in one country should be supported by the international counterparts through cooperation mechanisms. There are more experienced colleagues who will be maybe telling more how this international cooperation has been done till now, but I believe that we can unite our efforts in this manner, and it will be beneficial to all of us to work together in cybersecurity issues, especially in cyber threat intelligence and incident response issues. Although we know that the absolute security is never possible in the cyber world, we believe there is further work to be done in order to increase the cybersecurity level and our preparedness to cyber threats. And we are aware of the fact that being watchful and developing in preventive measures are crucial in cyberspaces. Most of the efforts are not preventive, they are reactive. So we should give more importance to preventive measures, and we should be more cooperative in preventive measures. Because of that, we focus on detection of the cyber incidents before they occur and try to minimize the potential negative effects by incident response and coordination while increasing our technological capabilities. And as cyberspace is a borderless field, it is hard to ensure cybersecurity of a party on its own. It's a multi-stakeholder and interdisciplinary issue, and we need to work with users, private sectors, NGOs, and international counterparts in order to fight against cyber threats. The first voting that we have already made, I mean, I found it interesting. I personally found that state is more important by protecting its citizens' rights in cyberspace, but here it's ISPs, users. Everyone is responsible for protecting himself, but as the states, we have also bigger roles on that. And most of the countries, I mean, the internet is still dominated by US. Russia, China, and several other countries are making their efforts to have their independence also in the internet domain. There are very well examples how to protect from that, but if there is no international cooperation, if we don't act together, I mean, if I ask you how you can cooperate with the global social media companies, we would be all aware that there is only limited cooperation on that, and it is dependent to these social media companies, and they are protected by the country that they are located and their center is.
First of all, Minister Noskurov, if you want to go, now is a convenient time, if you wish to. But thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you. I just want to come back to you on one issue. We're going to go into more detail about the international implications of all of this later. But given your role and given the greater importance that you attribute to the state than perhaps our audience does, how do you manage that complicated issue of the fact that the infrastructure is largely to 90% in the hands of the private sector, but you as the state are responsible for the overall security of your networks? What is the approach that you take, given the relative lack of resources of the state in cybersecurity over that of the private sector?
And actually, the cybersecurity, it's an evolving area that requires state-of-the-art techniques to cope with the changing attack vectors, and our strategies and action plans need to be up to date in this manner. And to meet the current and emerging cybersecurity threats, states need to constantly develop and adapt their cybersecurity strategies. And national cybersecurity strategies are the main documents of the nations that cover strategic principles, guidelines, and objectives associated with the cybersecurity. I will be telling what we've been doing in Turkey. Cybersecurity strategies are the key increasing national and global resilience, in my opinion. And in Turkey, we have executed 2 action plans since 2012, and the second action plan for cybersecurity covered the years 2016 to 2019, and we are working for the next 4 years cybersecurity plan. We established our National Computer Emergency Response Teams, TR-CERT, in 2013, and since then we've been increasing the technological capabilities and human resources of national CERT in a very dynamic manner. In addition, more than 1,200 institutional emergency response teams have been established and under public and private institutions, and all of these CERTs are working under the coordination of a national CERT. Main focus areas of the TR-CERT in cybersecurity are the cyber capacity building, technological measures, gathering and sharing threat intelligence, and protection of the critical infrastructures. So as the government, we are coordinating all these CERTs as the national CERT, and in this, I think international standardization activities also play a vital role. We are actively participating in study groups, in standardization in the international standardization bodies, and we are combating against the new cyber security threats. But here I would like to mention that as the International Telecommunications Union, it should take more active role also in cybersecurity. I mean, it's a UN organization, it's a UN body. In the recent years, they are also focusing some more, but it is not enough. We should have more joint efforts under the ITU. And in addition, we consider standardization as an effective way of lifting the lagging countries up, which would eventually mean strengthening the weakest links in the global cyber defense chain, because even if you do everything, cybersecurity and threats will come from that weakest link, especially in international level. And I believe, moreover, that is essential to reach some kind of international agreements on cybersecurity. As I have mentioned before, cyberspace transboundary characters require this cooperation, and we also, as Turkey, contribute to the works of international organizations, including UN, NATO, OSCE, OECD, G20, FIRST, TI, and CAMP. As a result, all of our efforts that we have carried out during the last years, I would like to mention that as Turkey, we have climbed from 43rd place to 20th place in Global Cybersecurity Index 2018, published by ITU. So all these combined efforts helped us to climb in that index. Dear colleagues, during the recent years, we are very pleased to host also international events in cybersecurity, such as International Cyber Shield exercise with ITU and many others. And we are planning new international cyber exercises in which I would like to invite all colleagues here to our upcoming events. Lastly, I would like to express my sincere belief in this conference as a wonderful platform for participants to exchange views and share experiences in the field of cybersecurity. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. We've had some very interesting issues thrown up already in this. And so, Hans-Wilhelm Dünn, I want to ask you, as President of the Cybersecurity Council in Germany, first of all, a sort of two-part question. First of all, I've heard you in the past be slightly concerned about Germany's preparedness in the realm of cybersecurity on a state level. Do you think that that is improving, is the first question. But the second question goes to this issue of international cooperation, because none of us, if international cooperation is not functioning properly, can be confident about our overall cybersecurity. But you know as well as I do that efforts in the UN and other bodies, the ITU and so on, they're moving at a snail's pace. They're going nowhere, and in the meanwhile, individual states are creating their own networks. We know that cyber weapons are being deployed liberally around the world. There's huge debates about interference with domestic political processes. Is there any sign that there is going to be a framework for international cooperation when it comes to cybersecurity, or is this the Wild West?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. And thank you very much to the Sberbank, because it's very important to have such an event like today. But our problem is cybersecurity is a very, very sexy topic. Everybody speaks about it. Every decision maker say, hey, it's very important. We have a lot of very important congresses in Europe, in Germany, with the backbone of the German industries, the small, medium-sized companies, the politician guys, and so on. And then they go home, and they do nothing. And that is a problem. Don't separate the topic from the daily business. And that is our problem. We separate it. And at the moment, if you see, 63% of the European staff who is responsible for IT security want to change the job because it's too stressful. They cannot following the warnings, and that is a big problem. And we have a fight for talents. We need around about 3 million people worldwide, and nobody wants to study it. And we have a lot of very interesting authorities. And Germany is the most powerful economy in Europe, and one of the most powerful economies in the world. And we have a national cybersecurity authority with around about 900 people at the moment. That is nice. And we have 16 states in Germany with their own law enforcement. And the problem is not the DAX 30 company, the Deutsche Bahn and so on. They have a big staff, they invest a lot. But the backbone of the German industry and the European industry are the small, medium-sized companies, family-oriented. They don't understand the topic. And I think a big mistake is that we separate the different levels, that we say, okay, we need more capabilities in the authority. Yes, that's right. But we need more awareness. We need more public-private partnership platforms. That is the only chance we have. We have a very big asymmetric setting. It is very easy to attack a German company. You need only a few $1,000s to do it. And I think we have to coordinate a European, a worldwide platform. We have to understand and control our own systems. And at the moment, that is not possible. I think we need an interdependent approach. We have to understand that we need each other. We have a lot of very good companies from the United States, from China. At the moment, we have a very complex debate about our 5G implementation. But I think it's not a question of black or white. We need the technology. We have to work together. And we need new instruments to open the box. I want to look into the soft and hardware. I want to check it every day. For that, we need a big comprehensive approach to implement more security labs to control it. And we need an understanding of security by design. It's not okay that you produce software with backdoors and with mistakes. And if you do it, it's okay. Perhaps you need it, but I want to have one central instance with a central certification standard. And I think that is the only way we have, and that is a question for the United Nations. For that, we have at the moment 2 current resolutions. I hope they want to start with the experts and working groups. But that is the only chance we have, and it's not a question of the organization of a German or European single authority. We have to work together, and we have to understand it together.
So let me get this straight. You think that the United Nations is the primary vehicle through which this cooperation, or as you suggest, a certification program should be administered?
Yes, because it's very easy. Sometimes, yes, you have, I think the first task is to generate stability. And it's not a question if it is a good or a bad state. Yes, it is a democracy or not. We need stabilization. And for that, we need international coordination. We have a smart planet with a central process enabler called cybersecurity. And it's not good to say, hey, we make a European way. Look at the European Union. We have a central agency, the ENISA, with around about 60 people. We have a European CERT. They are not responsible for their own systems. And we have national approaches, we have national cybersecurity strategies. And in Europe, the responsibility for security, for interior, is by the states, by the member states. And that is a big problem. And we have a very big internet. It's a smart planet internet. And we have no borders in this field. And we have a problem of attribution. We have a lot of perpetrators from different fields, from the state, cyber criminals, and so on. And normally, we need 218 days to understand that we have an attack. And that is a problem. I want to know who is the guy behind the machine. And then I can decide about a diplomatic way, or to take a big rocket, or to speak about offensive capabilities. And I think for that we need dialogue. And at the moment, and that is also a task for our diplomats in all the countries, we have no real dialogue. And that is a problem. Please don't stop the dialogue about international cybersecurity and law. We need international regulation, and the first step is to speak with each other.
So, a very, very forceful statement. I mean, it's worth remembering that the United Nations, things have rather got bogged down in the expert groups. We haven't really seen much movement there. And to me, it seems the position of the US, various EU member states, Russia, China, to name the big players, at the moment is a very, very long way away from each other. In which case, I'll come to one of those big players, Russia, and Vladislav Anischenko, you are responsible at the Analytical Center, amongst other things, for the Russian National Program for Digitalization. How do you engage with the fact that you're trying to create a secure internet in what is, for the moment, a pretty hostile world?
Добрый день.
Good morning. I think it's not just Russia. A lot of other countries, Germany and Turkey including, are interested in making the internet more secure, not just to the national segments of that internet, more secure and resilient. Yes, our national program, the digital economy, has a major stream of activities related to cybersecurity. To a great extent, Mr. Minister has been exposing that in a great way. In no way are we trying to wall off the Russian segment of the internet and make it more secure this way. I think walling off might be considered as a method of protection, but that will lead to a lot of vulnerabilities in the long run, because that will bring down the competitiveness of the products we developed behind those walls, the practices, the standards applied, and this eternal war between cyber criminals and defenders will see those walled-off territory ever trailing, ever farther behind. And what we are discussing today is, to a great extent, a part of the problem that you would call the Internet of People. You know, we have mentioned 5G today. We should probably speak about tomorrow. You know, if tomorrow we have to deal with the Internet of Things, of machines that will talk with each other one way or another, data will be generated and consumed by machines, that will create a largely different construct. And this will inevitably, I mean, at least in Russia, that implies a cross-border data exchange, and you can't really limit that. And I haven't really mentioned the strategy of AI development and the huge data sets to make sure that this AI actually learns something. You know, just doing the simple thing of using the volume of equipment, the industrial equipment, that uses all those data channels to make itself work. You know, those digital models, the life cycle models, the continuous improvement of production, all of those things will feed off the increasing volumes of data. So the attacks on cybersecurity, especially in the Russian segment, is not so much the issue. I mean, no longer. It is really an issue of storing personal data in the Russian territory, as the Russian law mandates. You know, this law of Yarovaya, as we are calling it. It is mostly about the security of industrial systems and telecom systems per se, because one thing is to have the Russian law penalizing doing certain things with credit card numbers, but this is not a national tragedy. But another thing is when an attack brings down an energy system, or brings down a plane, or takes out a nuclear reactor. I think this is a completely different problem, and this will not necessarily be connected with, you know, relations between state actors. This, I mean, if we used to have a pretty simple situation of launching an attack on a state or personal data, as industrial internet grows, it will be ever simpler to launch an attack on industrial systems, on the data that is generated by machines. So in this sense, building a national security system should require looking into tomorrow. And tomorrow is this industrial internet, the Internet of Things. And there's just nothing other than dialogue that can help us. It is a matter of standards. It is a matter of exchanging protocols. And the way we see it, at least as one way of doing things, it should be an open code. It should be an open source code. As opposed to using cyber protections, cryptographic defenses, because whatever is hidden by cryptography, who knows? I mean, they are by definition aiming to hide something from the other guy. And it is a matter of how much the governments trust each other and other actors trust each other. And that is not clear how they're going to trust each other. And the need to exchange data cross-border internationally, whether we want it or not, that is a necessity. I mean, if a plane is going from Moscow to Istanbul or Berlin, we're going to have to exchange data one way or another. Even if you build those cyber walls, that will require the kind of an approach to developing IT platforms of using data that will, by definition, be an environment of confidence, an environment to be trusted. Open standards, open source software, and I mean, the legal foundation should be long-term relations between nations and corporate actors. And, you know, perhaps finally going back to your original question, this national program that we have in Russia, the digital economy in Russia, there's a major stream of activity related to cybersecurity. To a great extent, it is aiming to make sure the critical points, the critical vulnerability points in the Russian segment, make them protected. But strategically, it's not a matter of localization. It's not a matter of building a walled-off Russian segment. It is a matter, more or less, of the reverse. It is about making more open environment to make sure that the IoT world, the world of the future, we should be more protected by definition.
There are some extremely interesting points there. In particular, we are at a moment of paradox, I think, in cybersecurity, where up until this point, I think we can probably all agree that the primary vulnerability within network computer systems has been human beings. And we have relied on a very small number of people who are cybersecurity engineers to protect us from ourselves and the way that we behave on the internet. That is about to flip, as you point out, with the Internet of Things. We saw what happened 2 years ago with the Mirai bot and the extraordinary power that can be generated through the Internet of Things for people involved in cyber malfeasance. But we're now facing the prospect of machine-to-machine learning and artificial intelligence inside systems, and of course, 10 years down the road, quantum computing and perhaps quantum cryptography, which really addresses the issue that you point out, but in a negative way. So my question to you, I'm very glad that you're thinking about these issues at the Analytical Center. Are you able, because I've asked people in cybersecurity companies around the world what they're doing about the Internet of Things and machine-to-machine learning, and they're all sort of saying, well, we're doing what we can, but we know that it's not enough. Are you being able to come up with innovative solutions for dealing with the threats that are going to proliferate in the next 5 to 10 years?
You know, I think I will not really be different from the companies that you spoke. We can't really be offering very innovative solutions that will certainly assure us, give us the cybersecurity. I mean, it's obviously a need for dialogue. The machines have not started to write the code themselves, and devising architecture has still remained in the hands of the people. So people can find an agreement, they can find some common ground. You are right that we can't really predict what new risks are going to emerge. You know, those quantum technologies or new AI technologies. All we can say right now is that if you have a turbine, say in a hydropower station, and it has, 5,000 sensors, part Russian, part international, and they send some data somewhere, or might get some data from somewhere, being quite sure that some of those sensors, just through no fault of anyone in particular, might go wrong. I mean, that security should be there. If you want a smarter society and a digital economy, you need to install ever more sensors. They need to operate properly. There's got to be some resilience even without the malfeasance. And whenever that happens, it's no longer just about one guy with a switch that can turn on or turn off the misbehaving device. We have a complicated architecture. And in this architecture, people operate the system without actually knowing how it operates. So the risks are there. At least these are the risks that we can assess and start working with.
And now let's go over to somebody who has frontline experience of what it is like to cooperate when it comes to criminality, but also when it comes to bigger issues of national cybersecurity, and that is Jürgen Storbeck, the first director of Europol between 1999 and 2004. But since then, Jürgen, you have worked a lot with governments and with law enforcement agencies and other agencies addressing these issues. And of course, cooperation is at the center. So from the perspective of a practitioner in law enforcement, what does that cooperation look like? And is there any way that it can be improved?
Yeah, thank you for giving me the floor. But before I answer your question, I just want to reinforce what you both have said. I'm extremely concerned how we try to establish global cybersecurity. First of all, there's not enough political awareness. It's an isolated approach, a national approach. You said it, Mr. Dünn. You made it even stronger. And one point more, and therefore I was very happy when you spoke about the new technology arriving. When we discuss cybersecurity, in the preventive measure, in the political dealing, we look normally backwards. Still, we discuss WannaCry. Oh, we have to do something. 2 years ago, it happens with WannaCry, the crisis. Nobody is really looking forward. Therefore, it is important that you look at the actual situation, but also that we look into the future. We cannot now say, hey, the future will be like this, but we have some idea, and we need an early warning system for law enforcement, but also for state and for the business, for the provider. And therefore we need a free market, a free platform, open source platform to which we all have access, that we can do a proper planning. A second point, before I answer your question, I come to it, just a moment. I think we know new technology is developed. Is our pressure, our political pressure, our pressure of society, of business strong enough to force those who develop new technology that they do it in a proper way, that they develop a secure technology? If they do not do it, they have not only to go to prison, all the business money has to be taken away. There is a responsibility, an economic, a technical, and an ethical responsibility to produce secure technology. Now coming back to law enforcement. Law enforcement is law. You need a law. We have not a real good legal base anymore. There's still the Budapest Convention of 2001, sometimes implemented with some additional, more or less recommendations how to interpret this convention. That's all. So we are in a Wild West, in a legal Wild West. Mr. Dünn said the only hope is the United Nations. I worked quite a lot with the United Nations. It's very difficult already to get a common political decision. Sometimes you get it, and you have to be very clever that they get a UN resolution that you should do more on cybersecurity. The moment that it goes to the expert groups, I remember 2018, there was a big expert group dealing with, and then there were so many political oriented, but also economic oriented disagreement, and then they gave up. So now law enforcement officials are not only bound by law, but they have also a vision. They want to fight cybercriminality, cybercrime on the net. And they form themselves now some forms of cooperation. Interpol, a wonderful organization. I worked for Interpol several years, and I'm still in a close contact with Interpol. But you have not to overestimate Interpol. It's a postmark, the telex service of the police. It is important. If it would not exist yet, it should be invented. But for real analytical work, for real investigation, it's not the right body. It supports national investigations, the investigation of the Russian police, but not more and not less. And they can coordinate bodies, investigation groups. Okay, then my agency, I founded and worked 12 years for. There's more hope, and I do not want now to make PR work for this institution. There we have information management and investigation exchange not only between police forces, but also custom authorities, some security services, etc., etc. And more private business is involved, adding expertise, helping, supporting this technology, and they are very often even involved in training and in development new tools. I'll give you an example. Last week there was a conference with 300 experts from around about 50 or 60 countries dealing with cybercrime and the use of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin and similar currencies. They spoke with each other. They are developing together a new training tool for tracing the money on the net, the way of cryptocurrency, and how to deal with mixers. Very important factor. And the same is true in international cooperation, not only the European member states, which are the European Union states, but also other states like US, like Turkey, some more countries. They developed a new tool to deal with Ghent crab. It's a very, it's a sort of a basis for a ransomware. Very useful, and it's open to all those law enforcement agencies cooperating with Europol. By the way, I remember 2001, and I prepared with Mr. Kuznetsov, who opened this conference, already an agreement between Russia and Europol. But it's only a strategic agreement. We are not allowed to exchange, we means Europol and Russia, we are not allowed to exchange personal data, to cooperate in real investigation. Why? Why did you not go on? It's really something I ask you, the Russian government and the deciders here, go to Europol start again the contact in order to enlarge it. At the same time, I signed an agreement with Colombia. Colombia has liaison officer at Europol, working closely together not only on cocaine trafficking, but also on counterfeiting of currency, of euro, of other similar important currency like the US dollar, etc. So we have all the time, we have now joint investigation teams supported by Europol. Investigation teams consisting of customs authorities from France, Carabinieri from Italy, Bulgarian police officials, Turkish officials, because Turkey is not a member of the European Union, but they have also an own liaison office there. And they exchange personal data. So we create new platforms for cooperation. We are good in information management on the European Union level, much better, by the way, Mr. Dunn, than on the national level, because public-private partnership plays an important role. We have common analysis. So a lot can be said about it, but I want not to be too long. I see already Misha is very impatient.
Well, before we go to questions, I just want our other three speakers to finish up with a few things. So far we've had the suggestion of open source code as the basis for the internet around the world. We've had the UN and the ITU as possible solutions. My response to that is we've been seeing the UN trying to work on this. We've seen the ITU work on this. It's a political minefield. It hasn't delivered results. And in a sense, there's an elephant in the room here, which is the United States. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone from the United States here because they're very reluctant to engage through those multilateral organizations. Doesn't that mean that ultimately, and Herr Dünn, I'm going to come to you for this, ultimately we will have to rely on a series of complex bilateral agreements. That's the first thing. And the second question, which everyone has raised, is how do we introduce security at the point of manufacture when we all know that innovation is driven by people's desire for convenience and the new gadget. And consistently, over decades, this has overridden security concerns. So I'll get Jürgen at the end to answer that last question, but the first question, Hans-Wilhelm, about the collaboration. It hasn't been happening after 15, 20 years.
Yes, thank you. I think that should be our target. We need an international resolution and so on. That's right. But we have now a problem. And for example, in Germany we have around about 60 billion euros damage in the field of cybersecurity. We have one problem with our law enforcement because all the figures are based off the criminal statistic. And the criminal statistic is very important. But it makes only sense if you have a report for it. And we have in Germany and in the world no report about cybersecurity because sometimes it's a big problem of reputation. And for example, if you speak with a European defense producer, if they have a problem, they have to react in minutes. And if they go to the law enforcement, and don't misunderstand me, I love our German law enforcement. It's the best law enforcement in the world, sorry. It's true. Yes, you see it here. This guy is beautiful and great. But we have not enough people, and we need more resources and capabilities. And if you are the CIO of a big German defense manufacturer, then you have to react in the next 2 hours. And if you go to the law enforcement, perhaps, then you have a problem. Because I want to know why you own all these interesting data. And they have only chance. That is a voluntary platform. We have a very good example in Switzerland, the millennia called, where you have a combination from the authorities, from the critical infrastructure sector, from the academia, that is very important, because we need staff. We have to fight for talents. And for that we need individual, voluntary reaction platforms. And I think that is the only chance we have. And we are in the beginning of digitization, in the beginning. What is with the next 3 years?
I'm going to break you off there and ask Vladislav to comment briefly before we go to questions, and then we'll get the minister to finish up. Vladislav, this question of Russian-US cooperation over internet security, is there any way that Russia could trigger a breakthrough in this? Because, as you know, it's a pretty static relationship at the moment.
Мне кажется, что
Well, I think that it is inevitable that in the nearest years, in that way or another way, well, you know, I do not really believe in multinational agreements in this area, but I think that as part of bilateral relations between countries like Russia, US, even US, China, and US, Europe, and Russia, China, we will set the rules of information sharing and rules for IT, but I think it will be more industry specific, because if we, well, I mean, the agreements will support some physical processes. So if we talk about transport, in this way or another, the transportation data and the relations between the countries in terms of transportation will be supported by the cybersecurity and data sharing agreements. So I think that it is very likely, the most likely way is to duplicate or even supplement the bilateral agreements in some industries by some amendments, additional agreements in cybersecurity and data sharing. Perhaps it is not enough, but it will be the first step to step up cybersecurity in different specific centers.
And now I want to turn it to you, the audience. I'll come to you, Jürgen, don't worry, but I want to get the audience in with some questions. If you have a question, can you state your name and organization and be as brief as possible? I'm looking. There, in the middle, sir. If the microphone can.
Thank you so much. I have a question. Yes, I'm from SFP company. I have a question that to colleagues that represent European countries and colleagues from Turkey. These steps that we see right now in our country, you know, these attempts to authorize users through passport, through ID, will they help to quicker understand who is on the other side of the computer? You know, something that Hans talked about. Thank you.
So basically, Minister Sayan, how do you feel about that, about IDing over networks?
I also talked about this during my speech, that to tell you the truth, we are listed on Twitter reports or Facebook reports, but all kind of activities that have been done come from the judicial process, in which for the efforts that have been done in the countries like USA, they are not even listed, and they have some legal basis, but not after judicial reports. So, to tell you the truth, most of the time when we ask who is on the other side to the countries, we don't have any results. So we have to do what we can do ourselves. And the countries are trying to do what they can do, getting information, collecting this within their own networks because of the lacking of international cooperation. But this should not be the case. So when the cable goes beyond your borders, you will be never sure whether you can get that information, even in some specific terroristic activities. So we should set the basis of cooperation, at least for some specific and for very well-defined terrorism activities. I mean, there are a lot of that we've been experiencing, and the life of the youth, I mean, just consider a love affair that our youth have been practicing. Pictures have been taken. It's been broadcasted all over the world, and people commit suicide because of that. We should help each other on that.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, sir, down at the front.
Good afternoon, Alexei Bacharenko from Deutsche Bank. Information security is a tool that can be used to achieve this or that goal. So the question, for what purpose do you use information security in the state? And what do you need to do if the goal of the state and the agenda of the state is different from that of the businesses in terms of using this tool? Thank you.
Vladislav, that seems to me very much up your street.
У меня есть удачный ответ.
I have a good answer to that question. Now, since we're talking about the national program of developing the national digital economy, I mean, unlike basically all the other tools that were created in Russia, the digital economy program was initiated by the businesses. And cybersecurity initiatives are mostly initiatives initiated by the businesses, not by the state. So I think that we are trying to kind of find a way where the state has its own interests, yes, but it tries to ensure security for the citizens and for the businesses. Because, I mean, in the end, the national interests do not cover all cybersecurity issues. And, well, I'll put it this way. They do not contradict each other. They might contradict each other only in one area, where there is a conflict related to the following: when the companies try to earn some more money in the area where it is not secure, it's not in the area not deemed secure by the state. For instance, crypto protection. For instance, some companies think that some crypto protection is not necessary, whereas the state thinks otherwise. But our national program helps to discuss any initiatives and debate on any initiatives, and they are not within the area of the state policy. They do not get into the state policy without being previously discussed with the businesses. I do not think there is a silver bullet here, but the mechanisms that we have suggested might partially address these issues. I'm not sure that I answered your question, but I think that we're talking about the question of dialogue, and our national program is based on business initiatives. And if the initiatives of the businesses are not in line with the position of the state, whatever the reason, it is the reason is because the state does not help the businesses to get additional profit where the businesses think it is possible, or there are some other things in play. But the initiatives can be discussed, they are debatable, but it is not possible when the initiative is initiated by the Ministry of Digital Development and it is not rated by the businesses, it is not discussed by the businesses, and it is then adopted on the state level. So the businesses have their say.
Me?
Over here, sorry.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Derek Pelita. I'm from the Central Bank of Mozambique. I'm not going to address my question to specific one of the discussion, but to all. In my country, cybersecurity is starting to be an issue to be considered. I would like to have an opinion or experience shared of how being Africa lack of resources, starting to have contact with this technology should start. Because on contrary of the case of Russia and Turkey, not have yet any national program against cybersecurity. So where to start, taking into account that there is a lot of investments to apply.
Thank you very much for that question. Hans Wilhelm, I'm going to ask you to answer that because vulnerabilities in Mozambique is vulnerabilities for us all. So what are we doing to empower countries in the developing world which don't have the same resources and infrastructure as us to assist their development? And if you can restrict yourself to a couple of minutes, and then I'll go on to the voting.
Yes, I think states like Mozambique, they have a big chance because you are very well connected in your country, and you have a lot of technical basement. And look in Germany or look in other states, we have a lot of different responsibilities. Yet, and I think a good approach would be, in Germany we are 20 years too late. I think you need a central authority for digitization, combine it with a good unit for cybersecurity. It's a central process enabler, or for somebody it could be a showstopper. And invite your partners in Europe, invite the different companies who are here at the moment, invite the decision makers from the different national authorities, and take the chance, because in Germany we have a lot of different ministries and so on, and everybody wants to be responsible for that. And I think that could be a chance for you. And be open. Don't separate any countries, any systems. Everybody is important at the moment. And organize a platform, a workshop, and perhaps we can help you.
Well, I think the International Cybersecurity Congress can take credit for that, for having some concrete assistance and cooperation emerging out of it. Thank you very much for that. And let's go on to vote 2 now. And vote 2 is, if you've all got your handy voting machines ready, do you agree that it's time to stop the negative rhetoric in cyberspace and instead promote global culture of cybersecurity and fight vulnerabilities together and low levels of cyber literacy? And answering realistically, do you think, 1, that is naive because it's a no-rules fight in cyberspace at the moment, and the ones who are exploiting it are, of course, cyber criminals? 2, it's counterproductive. Developing cyberspace, we always uncover new threats, and the digital world is not heading anywhere good at the moment. Or 3, we agree the digital space offers unlimited possibilities. The main thing is how to learn how to use them correctly. And I guess that's really a choice between 1 and 3. Are we going to be defeatist about this, or are we going to find ways of of finding cooperation. So 1, 2, or 3 for the final question. The excitement is mounting with 10 seconds to go. Oh, that's quite interesting. So 25% of the audience thinks that we've just got to accept that the rules of the road aren't going to come. That's a quarter of the audience at an international cybersecurity congress. I think that's pretty interesting. 70% believe that we need cooperation. Obviously, on one level, that's the rational thing that we as human beings should do. Whether we're capable of it or not, I don't know. To finish, I'm just going to allow, because I promised him I would, Jürgen to have a final response to one of the issues he wants to. Jürgen, I'd like you to restrict your remarks to a minute or so, if you could, because then we have to wind up. Jürgen Storbe.
So I have to speak a little bit quicker. What we did not mention yet, there are under the UN, there are some bodies like the Financial Action Task Force who has a regulative role to play. Then we have the OECD who forces member states and business to follow security rules. For example, in tracking and tracing of different products. And it could be extended even to cyber subjects. So there is something which could be supportive in the future, and we should never underestimate also what is going on in international conferences like this Congress, and I'm very happy that the World Economic Forum will handle one of the workshops. They have a certain moral role to play, or the Munich Security Conference, very important for politicians. There you may have a voice. And final remark, please allow it, also governments and, for example, the European Union, they have certain strengths to force business to produce secure products. Because if they do not do so, they do not get the market. You prohibit that they sell their products on the market. And that is very important. And that's the way how, for example, the European Union forces now Facebook and Microsoft and Google to follow some rules, including security rules.
Jürgen, thank you very much. And would you please join me in thanking our panelists? I have to say, once again, at an international conference, we realize that this is a very urgent issue. The challenges are absolutely immense, but I think the sentiment from the panel is we have to actually start taking action and move beyond the words. So please, thank you very much to my panel. An excellent start to the conference, I think.
Sorry, one addition, one very important addition. Today it's a chance for all of us, because cybersecurity is a question of trust, and we need the network of heads, and let's do it today. Thank you.